I would say that there's a certain disappointment about 26. But if we don't feed the pipeline of companies that are created, that ideas that are translated, we will not have the opportunity of the failures so that we have the successes as well. You need to do your development with the end in mind, otherwise you're doing science. And science is fun, but it's not translation.
Onyx Live is proudly sponsored by Humphreys Law and Panacea.
Thank you for the opportunity to chat. I'm Miguel Forte. I am an MD PhD by training, and I've done clinical, academic, I still teach, regulatory work, and industry work, where I really enjoy the multiple elements that go into what we do. And at a certain point moved into cell and gene therapy, and I've taken different roles in cell and gene therapy. Initially Chief Medical Officer, Chief Operating Officer, and then CEO of listed and private companies in different technologies, and currently CEO of a gene engineer, iPSC-derived cell and gene therapy. I believe that it's not only the job that we do in our companies, but also the job that we do furthering the field. So I also have responsibilities at the ISCT, the International Society of Cell and Gene Therapy, where I'm currently the president, as well as ARM, where I'm Alliance for Regenerative Medicine, where I am member of the board and the executive committee. If we further the field, we'll create better conditions for the job that we do, and altogether we'll bring value faster and bigger value to patients.
So we last met each other at the Jefferies Healthcare Conference in London, November 2025. And since then, obviously, we've had JPM in January, and now we're here at Advanced Therapies in March. How do you think the cell and gene space has evolved over the past few months?
This meeting in March is a great meeting. It's kind of after the beginning of the year, starting to go into the year as we start to see how 26 is unfolding. I would say that there's a certain disappointment about 26, because after Jefferies and really catalyzed at the good weather at JP Morgan, people felt, yeah, 26 is going to be better. Inside the field, inside biotech, and definitely in the macro environment, things have been challenging. And so we haven't seen the positive progression everybody was hoping. I don't think we have seen clearly a negative progression. I mean, there's been some challenges and we can talk about them, but I think the overall field, everybody was expecting a better outcome and more dynamic outcome, and it's sluggish in getting there. Nevertheless, I think we're seeing technological development, we're seeing good clinical data coming out, we're seeing some challenges on the regulatory environment, which impacts uncertainty, and we're definitely not seeing the tranquility that we probably would need in the overall environment, and the Middle East context is a significant one because it impacts everybody, but also impacts an emerging field of cell and gene therapy in there. I mean, there were plans, there were activities that were being fostered to develop the field in the Middle East, and that's going to be curtailed. It's being currently curtailed for where we are. So overall, people was hoping for more. There is a macro environment impacting, and there's some aspects of regulatory, namely FDA, that are having impacting. Nevertheless, I think, and we can see it here, there's a lot of resilience. There's a lot of belief in the promise of cell and gene therapy. And I think that should be growing focus on making sure that people do it with the business model in mind. So I continue optimistic, but obviously we need to be realistic, and above all, we need to be resilient, because this is a marathon, not a dash.
What do you think are some of the failures that have resulted in that lack of progress in cell and gene over the past few months?
I'll give you one specific example, which actually leads to or links to what I'm doing in terms of some of the lobbying and context. When the plane takes off, that's the moment of more uncertainty, right? When it's on the land, it's okay. When it's flying, it's also okay. Cruising speed, it's taking off. When companies are creating, they go from a concept to relevant data. That's where funding, that's where the risk is bigger. And VCs in a more positive environment were more willing to take risk at that stage. I think we're seeing VCs and investors wanting to be have more de-risked approach, so they go for post-clinical data. And so really, I mean, and we're failing on taking that risk because of the uncertainty, because of all of that. So that's one element of failure. I mean, I can understand the perspective of the VCs. I can understand the perspective of where do you put your bets and your risk. But if we don't feed the pipeline of companies that are created, that ideas that are translated, we will not have the opportunity of the failures so that we have the successes as well. One of the things I've been trying to do is to get more public funding for that early stage. And I've engaged with the European Parliament, with the European Commission, saying, look, we need to foster biotech in Europe, like we need to take care of ourselves more and more in the overall context. So the challenge is here on the translational first step. Why don't you, instead of the big funding that you do in the horizon, why don't we get small funding, quickly decided, so that people can have access to small amounts of fund to generate proof of concept, to then be in a stronger position to go to the traditional investors and say, look, here is my value proposition, here is some proof of concept, let's now talk about more de-risked approach. So that's, and again, at the same time, we're seeing companies trying to find alternative solutions. You know, financial engineering to get funding, other types of funding that really bring money, because all that we want to do is get an idea with a product in mind and really generate the evidence and get the funding to support it.
So you delivered a talk earlier this morning. What was your main message to the audience?
Two messages. One, a message about Kiji, the company that I am CEO, but I also, because I believe that company fits well on my broader message about cell and gene therapy. We have a responsibility, any biotech leader has a responsibility to get the company ready for the commercialization, the success at the end. When you launch a product, you need to understand the market, you need to understand competition, you need to understand payment and how the product is going to be paid, and you need to understand how the physicians are going to use it. So you need to do your development with the end in mind, otherwise you're doing science. And science is fun, but it's not translation, it's not commercial geared, it's not value generating in a business environment. So, and I wanted to there's three business model, three buckets. One is the autologous ex vivo gene engineer, the CAR T, blood from you, engineered back to you, one patient, one batch, every manufacturing dependent, relies on localized manufacturing, a different business model, not very geared to the traditional pharma model. Second bucket, in vivo. Yes, geared to pharma model because it's off the shelf, you inject, you do it in vivo. But obviously we still have a lot of technical developments to get there, but it will be mainstream. And then final one, which is where Kiji sits, and also Akatsuki, another one that I am chair of the board, is where you engineered cells for a purpose and you optimize the cell sourcing from iPSC. It's also off the shelf, it's also compatible with the business model of traditional pharma, but it's slightly different. So if you have those three in mind, when you're going to have a project, see where it fits. And so consequently, how do you prepare the value proposition and the stakeholders that are going to support you? This is essential. So I wanted to have a message to the field and fit in that message my specific company value proposition.
You touched upon the Middle East a few moments ago, just briefly. It seems like it's a geography that hasn't had that much exposure to biotech, but has been trying to increase in recent years. Yeah. And obviously the conflict in the past couple of weeks has thrown things off. Do you feel like the global access of biotech and cell and gene is shifting at all?
Traditional biotech has happened in the US, and Europe has kind of tried to catch up on it. I think Europe needs to get the act together and do better, and we talked about that. There are two areas where opportunities are exploding or really growing. One is Asia, with China leading. There's a lot of knowledge that came back to China. There is, I think, an intention to have biotech as part of their strategic actions. And we're seeing a lot of good work, cost-effective work, quality work, and really an expanding booming in China. And we can talk more about that. But then also, there is an intention in the Middle East. There's money, there are patients, there's a good ground for gene therapies because there's a lot of hereditary pathologies. And we were kind of fostering that. Namely, there was a plan for a meeting to happen in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia in May. How is that going to be? Well, we don't know. When travel is difficult, the condition is unstable. So obviously it's impacting, first and foremost, the people there are being impacted, but obviously all the business, all the activities are being impacted as well. And an opportunity that was arising, which is an intention to develop cell and gene therapy there, is now becoming more challenging, more difficult, if at all possible, in the near future because of that environment.
Fantastic. Well, we'll have to see how things progress over the future. Miguel, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to chat.
Appreciate it.
Right.